Hey there, truth seekers. Welcome to episode 165 of the Bible Difficulties and Answers podcast. I'm your host, Lance Smith, and today we're strapping on our hiking boots for a trek up Mount Sinai to wrestle with a question that's got more twists than a desert trail. Exodus 24:10, can God be seen? Have you ever wondered if anyone could actually lay eyes on the Almighty? What would it look like to stand in God's presence? And how do we square that with verses saying no one can see God and live? This one's a real head scratcher, folks, and it's not far off from last week's dive into God's presence. So I'm keeping it curious, conversational, and maybe a tad cheeky, but I'm also hunting for a fresh angle to keep you glued to your headphones. So grab your coffee, your Bible, and let's chase this divine mystery like it's a treasure map in the sands of Mount Sinai. We're zeroing in on Exodus 24:10 in the New Living Translation. Here's what it says. There they saw the God of Israel. Under his feet there seemed to be a surface of brilliant blue lapis lazuli, as clear as the sky itself. Okay, full disclosure, I got a few messages about mispronouncing words last week, and this, lapis lazuli, was one of the culprits. Okay, moving on. If that verse doesn't make your eyebrows shoot up, check your pulse. They saw the God of Israel. Now, hold the phone. Didn't God tell Moses in Exodus 33:20, "You may not look directly at my face, for no one may see me and live"? And doesn't John 1:18 say, no one has ever seen God? So what's going on here? Did Moses and his crew get a VIP pass to the divine throne room? Or is there more to this story? Let's unpack this like a Bedouin's tent and figure it out. First, let's set the scene. In Exodus 24, Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, yep, that's another one I botched last week, and 70 elders of Israel are climbing Mount Sinai after God seals the covenant with his people. This is a huge moment. God's just laid out the terms of his relationship with Israel like a sacred contract. In fact, Exodus 24:8 tells us Moses splattered blood on the people, declaring, "This blood confirms the covenant." Now, God's inviting the big shots up the mountain for a divine meet and greet. They get up there and boom, they see the God of Israel. But here's the kicker. The text doesn't paint a full-on portrait of God. There's no glowing eyes, no flowing beard, no heavenly snapshot. Instead, it zooms in on what's under his feet, a surface of brilliant blue lapis lazuli, as clear as the sky. Then in verse 11, they eat and drink in God's presence and live to tell the tale. That's massive because getting that close to God's holiness is usually like strolling into a spiritual blast furnace. So what did they actually see? Was it God in all his glory or something else? Let's dig into the text like archaeologists. The New Living Translation said they saw the God of Israel, but the focus is on this lapis lazuli pavement, and it's a clue. Lapis lazuli is this stunning blue stone, prized in the ancient world, often tied to royalty and divinity. The description, as clear as the sky itself, screams majesty, transcendence, something out of this world. It's like the Bible saying, hey, they saw something of God, but not the whole shebang. It's a glimpse, not a full-on stare. And the fact that they're chowing down afterward without being zapped into oblivion tells us this was a crafted glimpse, a divine sneak peek, not the unfiltered reality of God's essence. Now, this question, can God be seen, is a classic Bible difficulty, and it's one the Big Book of Bible Difficulties by Norman Geisler and Thomas Howell tackles head on. They point out that God's full essence can't be known directly in this life. They lean on 1 Corinthians 13:12, which says, "Now we see things imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in a mirror, but then we will see everything with perfect clarity." In other words, we're getting blurry snapshots now, not the HD version. They also cite Romans 1:20, which says God's invisible qualities are seen through creation, and John 1:18, which doubles down. No one has ever seen God, but the unique one, who is God himself, is near the Father's heart. He has revealed God to us. Okay, the big reveal comes through Jesus, who says in John 14:9, anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. So the Bible's hinting that while God's full-on presence is too much for us, he shows up in ways we can handle, like through creation, through Jesus, or in this case, through a dazzling vision of his glory. Let's zoom out and look at the bigger biblical picture, again, sticking with the New Living Translation. The Bible's got this tension, like a tug of war between God can't be seen and, whoa, they saw something. On the can't be seen side, we've got Exodus 33:20, where God tells Moses straight up, no one may see me and live. Then there's 1 Timothy 6:16, which describes God as living in light so brilliant that no human can approach him. No human eye has seen him nor ever will. That's crystal clear. God's holiness and glory are so intense. It's like staring into the sun times a billion. Our frail human frames can't handle the full wattage of his presence. But then we've got these moments where people do see something. Ever wonder what it'd feel like to stand in God's glory without being overwhelmed? Take Isaiah 6:1. I saw the Lord, he was sitting on a lofty throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Isaiah's freaking out, thinking he's toast because he's seen God. But it's a vision of his glory, not the whole deal. Or check out Ezekiel 1:26-28, where Ezekiel sees a figure whose appearance resembled a man on a throne, surrounded by brilliant light and a glowing halo like a rainbow. The text calls it the appearance of the glory of the Lord. Notice the pattern? These are visions of God's glory, not his core essence. It's like God's projecting a hologram of his majesty that's safe for human consumption. Picture yourself on Sinai with Moses. What would you feel seeing that lapis lazuli glow? Drop your thoughts on our Facebook page. So, what's happening in Exodus 24:10? Scholars call this a theophany, a fancy word for a visible manifestation of God in a form humans can handle. The elders aren't seeing God's face or his full being. They're catching a glimpse of his glory, symbolized by this jaw-dropping lapis lazuli pavement. It's like God saying, here's a taste of my majesty, but I'm turning down the brightness so you don't get fried. The folks at Enduring Word put it well. They did not see God himself, but they did see a glorious, some partial representation of him, focused on the clear blue stone beneath his feet. Okay, that tracks with the text's focus on the pavement, not God's form. Now, here's where I want to take a fresh angle because this feels a lot like last week's dive into God's presence, right? Last episode, we talked about how God reveals himself in ways that meet us where we're at, through burning bushes, pillars of fire, or even a still small voice. This week, I'm struck by the why behind this vision. I remember hiking Kennesaw Mountain once, feeling small under the vast sky and thinking, if this is just creation, what must God himself be like? That's the kind of awe that the elders felt. Why does God show up with this lapis lazuli light show? It's about the covenant. Exodus 24 is all about God binding himself to Israel, promising to be their God. The blood in verse 8 sealed the deal, and this vision is like a divine signature on the dotted line. I once saw a contract signed with a handshake so firm, it felt like a promise etched in stone. That's what God's doing here. sealing his covenant with a vision. The elders got to see just enough to be awestruck, to know they're in the presence of the Almighty, but not so much that they're overwhelmed. It's God meeting them in the middle, like a good friend who knows how much coffee you can handle before you start shaking. Let's pull in some wisdom from our sources to flesh this out. The folks at Bible Ref note that this vision is about God's transcendence. They write, the description of the brilliant blue pavement emphasizes the mystery and majesty of God's presence rather than a physical form. Okay, that's spot on. The focus on the lapis lazuli isn't random. It's a symbol of heaven, of royalty, of something beyond human experience. Meanwhile, Aish offers a cool Jewish perspective, pointing out that this vision was a unique privilege for the elders, tied to the covenant's confirmation. They argue it's less about seeing God's essence and more about experiencing his reality in a way that seals the deal for Israel. Now, here's a pull quote from Precept Austin that nails it. They write, the elders saw a manifestation of God's glory, not his essential being, for no man can see God in his fullness and live. Okay, that's the heart of it. This wasn't God in his unfiltered glory. It was a crafted glimpse, like a movie trailer that teases the big picture without showing the whole film. And the fact that they eat and drink afterward, that's huge. In the ancient world, sharing a meal was a sign of covenant, of relationship. God's not just showing off, he's inviting them into communion, saying, we're in this together. Hey, skeptic, sipping that latte, raising an eyebrow. You're thinking, Lance, this sounds contradictory. A fair point, but the Bible's showing layers. Think of the sun. You can't stare at it without going blind, but its light reflects in a lake. That's the elders seeing God's glory in Exodus 24:10, not his essence. John 1:18 and 1 Timothy 6:16 talk about his unfiltered, full-on God, his face, which is too much for us mortals. But God, in his mercy, gives us glimpses through theophanies, through creation, and ultimately through Jesus, who bridges the gap. Speaking of Jesus, let's tie this to the New Testament because that's where the puzzle pieces click. John 1:18 says, Jesus, the unique one, reveals God to us. In John 14:9, Jesus tells Philip, anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. Jesus is the ultimate theophany, God in human form, making the invisible visible in a way we can grasp. The elders on Sinai got a sneak peek of God's glory. We get the full picture in Christ. It's like God went from showing a Polaroid to streaming in 4K. So, what's the fresh take here? I think it's about invitation. Exodus 24:10 isn't just about seeing God. It's about God wanting to be known. He's not playing hide and seek. He's revealing himself in ways that draw us closer without overwhelming us. The lapis lazuli pavement, the covenant meal, it's all God saying, I want you to know me, to trust me, to walk with me. That's the thread that runs from Sinai to the cross. Last week, we talked about God's presence in the everyday. This week, it's about his presence in the extraordinary, in those mountaintop moments that change everything. Let's wrap this up with a practical takeaway. If you're wrestling with whether God can be seen, don't just look for a cosmic light show. Look for his glory in the world around you, his creation, his word, his son. Romans 1:20 says, his invisible qualities are seen in what he's made. That sunset, that act of kindness, that moment of grace, it's God's lapis lazuli pavement, a shimmering glimpse of his glory, calling you closer. And if you're feeling like God's too big, too distant, Remember Exodus 24:10. He showed up for Moses and the elders in a way they could handle, and he'll do the same for you. That's it for episode 165, folks. Join me next Friday when we tackle Exodus 25:18. If it's wrong to make graven images, why did God command Moses to make one? It's going to be a wild ride, so don't miss it. Hit up our Facebook page, shoot us an email at BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers@gmail.com, or drop a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or Podbean. All our episodes are waiting for you at BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers.podbean.com. Keep digging, keep questioning, and keep seeking the truth. I'm Lance Smith, wishing you good luck, good health, and God bless. So long, everybody.